Hey folks, my name is Ravish and welcome back to another video in the series of DevOps Real Time Scenarios or DevOps Real Time Questions. Okay, so as you can see on my screen, today's problem statement is what exactly is the difference between an AIR file, a jar file and a war file. And I've seen that in a lot of interviews people generally ask like what kind of artifact do you produce and what kind of file it is. And even I have asked a lot of times this question, that what exactly is the difference between all of them and when should we produce what and how to produce and so on and so forth. All right, so we're going to discuss that today in this video. So before moving further, I would like to request that if you're new over here and seeing me for the first time, kindly subscribe the channel because it really motivates me to create more content like this. So without further ado, let us understand the problem statement. Okay, so before moving further, we would like to talk a bit about the Java application. So all of these files are basically Java applications. Okay, so based on Java language that we use. So when Java applications are deployed, all the files that constitute the Java app are compressed and packaged into a single file. So all of these Java jar file, war file or an AIR file are all packages. Okay, so we have to, this is the first thing that you need to know, that everything is packaged and there can be multiple files in it. Your code, your text file, your code file and your meta-inf file, everything that you want to package gets packaged in one single entity, and that would be your AIR, jar or a war file. Okay, so while compressed, files are typically given a zip extension, right? So you might be wondering like why it is like a jar, the extension is jar, war or AIR, because what generally happens is you get a .zip, right? This kind of extension that you get. But the Java community users instead uses the AIR extension. So let me just scroll like this. Okay. So for Java based applications, what we generally do is we use AIR extension. So AIR extension is something that we use, and this is for Java EE based applications. Okay, so EE means enterprise based applications, and this is what we need. War, the war file .war is used for Java web-based applications basically. Okay, so that's the one basic difference in this, and the full form of this is enterprise archive. Okay, and for this it is web archive. Okay, and the third file that you already know, .jar, is consist of basically class files that whenever they are compiled, whenever .java file compiled to something, it produces a class file, right? So it's a combination of all those files and it is known as Java archive. So first of all, you need to know this, what exactly is the full form. Okay, let's talk about something else in this. I'll change the color. Let's go with green. Okay, so this would be the first point that you need to know. Now let's talk about something, the second thing. Okay, so the one thing that makes common in all of these files is AIR, jar and war files are simply zip file that contains the various images. So what it can contain? It can contain images, it can contain your XML files, and you already know this is extensible markup language. It can contain that, property files, and your Java code. Okay, etc. if there is anything. Okay, so you can say that all of these, whatever you are seeing over here, constitute of your Java application. So all in all, this will create a Java application for you. Okay, if the AIR, war or jar extension or any of these files is changed to zipped, it can be opened with any standard decompression tool. So if you want to convert all this jar file, war file or air file to a zip file, then it can be opened with any standard standard tool. For example, you have the very famous WinRAR, and the other one is the one which I like to use most is 7-zip, and other things. Okay, so this is very basic scenario of this. Let's talk more about why do we use air, jar and war files. Okay, so the third thing is why. Okay, so even the simplest Java application can be composed of like 10 to 20 or 30-40 independent files. So let's consider a scenario in which we have an application. Okay, so this application, if based is written in Java, then it would be having some files. So let us consider like 20 to 40 Java files that constitute an application. It could be any type of application. Okay, complex enterprise application can contain thousands of files. So when we talk about enterprise level application, complex enterprise level, they can have close to thousands of lines. I mean, let's consider 1,000 in this case. And you can make software development easier with many files with specific responsibilities, but it complicates application deployment. Okay, so we use this to simplify. So you can simplify this process when you move application between environments, link them at runtime, move them across networks and store them in Maven repositories when you package multi-part application as a single compressed file. Okay, so despite these differences between jar file, war file or an air file, they can all help to simplify your Java application at the deployment time. Okay, so this is the reason why we use these kinds of file. Now the fourth point is to how do we create them. So I'll take this color. So the fourth point is creation. Okay, so since war, air or jar file all use same standard compression algorithm, okay, same algorithm, don't mind my language. They can be created with any standard compression tool. However, the JDK that you install with a special utility named jar.exe, okay, which will package and compress a web, enterprise or Java application into their corresponding types. Okay, there are also a number of popular DevOps tools that will automatically package applications such as air, jar or war files as a part of your continuous integration workflow. So consider an example for that. Okay, so generally what you folks do, you install Jenkins, right? Okay, and when you create your pipeline, what you do is you use some kind of software with that, a build tool like Maven, Gradle or Ant. Ant is quite old, so a lot of people go through Maven or either through Gradle. So these are the things that you use, and with the help of these you can create a jar file, a war file or an air file. Okay, with the help of these there are multiple manual steps to create these files, but in the generally pipeline you just have to write a few lines and then you would be able to create all of these files. Okay, and this is one thing that you can answer in the interview, that it's Maven, Gradle and Ant. If someone asks like how do you create them, you can create them by using Maven, Gradle and Ant, and there are multiple tools available, there are commands available. Okay, so there is one thing that you need to know. Okay, now even if you want to forget everything or don't want to learn everything associated with it, let's talk about directly the differences. Okay, so this is something that you need to know at the end, because what happens is if you even forget this whole summary which I've talked about in this video, you need to know the differences and learn them. Okay, so we'll talk about the war file and an air file. Okay, so first thing that we talked about, let's name it point A. First thing is it is known as web application archive. I'll do like this, archive. Okay, or you can just call it web archive file. This is enterprise application archive, or just an enterprise archive. Okay, this, the B point, this is the supported APIs are servlet. You already know what servlet is, or JSP, Java Server Pages. Okay, and this supports Java Enterprise Edition APIs. Okay, now what does it contain? So the third point would be contain part. Let me just minimize this. Contain part. So basically it contains your web-based resources such as images or HTML code and property file, which I told you, property file, and your compiled code, which is classes. So I'll just write compiled code. Okay, and this is like for example other Java EE enterprise archives such as war file or rar file or an EJB enterprise Java bean, something like that, jar file or a jar file. Okay, so basically air file can contain a war file, but war file cannot be a cannot contain this air file. Okay, this is one very important thing. Now the next thing is, what is the target runtime? Let me just write it so that you won't forget. This is target runtime. Okay, and this is your, what does it contain? Okay, and this is your API that is supported, API support, and the abbreviation. Okay, abbreviation. Cool. Okay, so the target runtime is Java Web Profile Compliant Application Server. So this needs an app server. Okay, such as Tomcat. One of the most famous one is Tomcat. Okay, and this needs a Java and just this application server is like web server. Do not be confused. There is a difference between a web server and an application server. So Tomcat, and this requires a Java EE compliant, enterprise compliant. So you must have heard about JBoss or your WebSphere, right? So this is something known as that. And the last part which you need to know is the deployment descriptor. So you need a descriptor for the deployment, right? So the deployment descriptor is for this we have web.xml, and for this we have application.xml. Okay, so this is the main difference. Okay, so all in all, you can say the biggest difference between a jar, war, or an air file is the fact that they are targeted towards different environments. An air file requires a fully Java Platform Enterprise Edition or like Jakarta Enterprise Edition, such as WebSphere or JBoss to run. Whereas a war file only requires a Java EE Web Profile Compliant Application Server to run, and jar file only requires a Java installation. So if you, all in all, if you want to run a Java file, jar file, it just need a Java installation. That's all. So if you have something like for example abc.jar, you can just do like Java name of the jar, so abc.jar, and this would be able to run the application. You can check this part because it's been quite some time that I have run any Java application, but it somewhat runs like this. Okay, there are no internal there are also not any internal restrictions and requirement that apply to air, war, or jar files. Air file themselves must have application.xml, which I just told you about. This is very important, contained within a folder named as meta-inf. So this should be under a folder known as meta-inf. Okay, A war file requires a web.xml, which I just told you about this, and contained inside a folder known as webinf. Webinf. Okay, Java files have no such requirements. You can just create a package out of it and name it like .jar. So nothing like meta-inf or webinf. Okay, so this is one of the difference over here. So at the end, I would like to draw something that would be much helpful for you. Let's select this color and let's select this. So consider this as a war file. Okay, so this is, I'm sorry about that, this is your ear file. Okay, your ear file can contain a meta-inf. This meta-inf contains your, what did we saw, application.xml. So app, I'm just writing the short form .xml. Okay, this is your ear file. This ear file can contain your war file. There is a war file inside it. Okay, let me draw it in a proper manner. I'll just pick something. Okay, this seems to be fine. This, let me put it here. I think this should be perfect. There is a war file inside it. Okay, and this can contain your images and stuff, which we talked about over here. Images, HTML. Okay, images scan. Also, this contains a folder known as webinf. Webinf, and it has to contain a web.xml. Okay, and it can also contain a jar file. So like small kind of a thing, that would be fine. This is a jar file which contains your class files, compiled code. Okay, this war file can contain your images. This can contain your what else, your text files if you want to keep it. And what else do we have in jar file? Property file, HTML, etc, etc. So all in all, enterprise application is the biggest. Inside that you can have a war file. Inside war file you can have a jar file. Inside air file you can have a jar file as well. So something like this. Okay, so I hope you have understood this. So let's just walk through everything again. So the problem statement was, let me just push it over here. Problem statement was air file, jar file, and a war file. All of them are based on Java. It's a package that contains your code, text, meta-inf. You can also create a zip file out of it, but it's not recommended. All of them are based on Java. Air file, war file, Java, Java EE based, enterprise archive, web based, web archive, class files, just class file, it contains jar file. Second thing common is that images, XML files, property, Java code, etc. or the Java application, this constitute as a Java application. And how do I drag it? I'm not sure. Okay, this is fine. And then all of them can be converted to zip file by using WinRAR or 7-zip kind of a software. Why do you need them? Because every application has 20 to 40 Java files, HTML files, all these files. And in order to run them, you cannot keep them in a directory, right? And you have to package them and then you have to run them. So you have to create an archive out of it. And depending on the type of application, you can create either a jar file, war file, or an ear file. Okay, let's talk about the creation. So in the creation, same standard algorithm that we used for like when you install Java in your system, you have jar.exe. Jenkins pipeline is one another way of doing it. If you, as a DevOps, you create a pipeline, you install a plugin for Maven, for Gradle, for Ant. And then based on your targets, you can create a jar file, war file, or an ER file. Let's talk about the differences, which is the main part and as asked in the interview many times. So what exactly is the first is abbreviation: Web Application Archive, Enterprise Application Archive for ER file, API support is servlets in JSP for war file, Java EE API for enterprise. What does it contain? It contains images, HTML, property file, compiled code. It can contain a war file, RAR file, EJB jar, and on the target runtime is app server, like web server, Tomcat. For this you have JBoss, WebSphere, a fully compliant EE compliant. For the deployment descriptor, you need to have a web.xml in this and this application.xml inside a meta-inf folder, and this web.xml is inside a web-inf folder. Okay. Here a jar file, you can just run it. You just need Java to be installed in your system. You just need abc.jar. If you have abc.jar, you can then just run Java and the name of the jar with the extension. Okay. All in all, it's an ER file can contain the meta-inf, has to contain a meta-inf in that application.xml as a deployment descriptor. In that it can contain a jar file, and the folder structure can be different. This is just an example to show you. That would be I think enough for an interview. If you want to explain, it can contain a war file which contains the web.inf, which contains the web.xml. It can contain images, text, and HTML. All in all, it's a very basic diagram of how it looks like. Okay, so I hope you folks have understood this part. Okay, so if there is anything that you have not understood, if there is anything you want me to explain again, feel free to comment below and we will address that. And before ending this video, I would like to request that please subscribe the channel because it really motivates me to create more content like this. So thanks guys, and I'll see you in the next one.